Now it's time for our customer case with Stefanka Hansen and Pia Metzlaff. Would you like to join the stage? Great. And Neha Devi, of course.
So one of the things, I'm Neha Dave. I head the change management practice in Effective People. One of the things is I sort of force myself into these events because you are going to go down dark, deep rabbit holes today with lots of technical information, everything that you need. But I just want you all to come up for air sometimes and think about the human experience at the end of it. There's a people impact at the end of it. And of course, we ultimately want engagement and adoption of whichever module you're on, whatever features you decide to switch on. I've invited Pia and Stefanka here who are going to talk most of the session. But what we're going to focus on is one very key change intervention that we use called a change network. You would hear of it in different terminology. I think, Demant, you're calling it community of practice. It could be super user, it could be change champion, it could be change agent. But the idea of this intervention is we are looking at peer-to-peer learning. So you are nominating, coaching, working with individuals across your organization that you sort of bring together and help you deliver this change for you. Most of you are in this situation where you are federated, where you're scattered, where you don't have enough time, where a lot of change is happening, not just within the HR world, but within your world in general. We are working under these operating circumstances, which are not always very easy. What can you do in that situation? You can get more support, you can amplify what you're doing, you can galvanize. It's the whole premise of social media, right? So we know it is a technique that works. Who can be in your network? I've listed a few roles here: process owners, HR teams, IT teams, and the controversial one here is business users. Get people involved, create your allyship and create your network even in your project mode, because it might be too late when you go live. When do you use it? You could use a change manager, you could start your selection. Typically, an ideal time is pre-UAT. Yeah, particularly if you're into iterations, you could invite and start the nomination around iteration 3 or definitely before UAT, because you want your users, whoever's participating in UAT, to understand the project, the vision, what it's going to do, the role you play. So I would say pre-UAT is probably your last time. You're a bit too late if you do it after. So that's when you would start thinking about your change network or actually organizing them. And what if you don't do it? And again, this is one of the interventions we use when we manage change. If you don't do it, firstly, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself and the project team, which is usually under pressure a lot. You're missing a lot on the cultural nuances that you may not get sitting in a project room, sitting in groups, sitting in corporate, sitting in HQ, wherever you are. You may not have that access, you may not have the knowledge, and you might miss some of the resistance as well. What Pia and Stefanka are going to talk about is how they brought this concept to life. Their situation is something you will all resonate with, particularly around that federation, particularly around sort of being quite global and wanting local to do most of the work. So they're going to talk about how they did it, what was their philosophy, and more importantly, how they continue this network as well. So over to you both.
Thank you very much. So what I will talk about today is the journey that we have been on as part of implementing or basically upgrading our recruiting platform in SuccessFactors. Just to begin with, I will share with you, that I started Demant for 3 years ago. I was a global HR business partner for the organization. I had one clear goal, and that was to establish an HR infrastructure that can support our hearing care business. I might say hearing care once in a while. It is a retail business. We have clinics around in 24 countries and 10,000 employees globally. So that was the goal that was set in front of me. And what I really fast realized was that we did have a SuccessFactors. We did have an employee central foundation. We did have a recruiting central module. We did have a performance management module. And the business basically didn't like it. So that was the starting point. So what I will share with you is, what is the organization about? What has possibly gone wrong in the first iteration? What did we decide? How did we build it on the leadership philosophy that we have? And how did that play along with a new way of working within our HR organization globally? And we are in the middle of designing that. So it is a big change in itself as well. We decided to get some change expert support. That was actually here, so that's where our cooperation started. And then I'll talk a little bit about, or Stepanka will, how our HR change work within Recruiting Central. I think it will basically never end. I don't know if that was a good, way of starting this, but that is the case. Stepanka joined me in the organization 1.5 years ago. Her role is HR, data and process manager within our retail organization, and we have been the backbone. The two of us, we are the HR organization in our retail organization and business. So we're not many, but we are the two of us. So Demant is a hearing healthcare organization. We help people hear better around the world, but we actually have another part as well, and that is our communication part. Some of you might know the brand called Sennheiser. We bought their gaming part, we bought their communication part. So if any of you need better communication for offices or anything, think EPOS. So just a little bit of a branding here. So we have basically our hearing aids organization, which is developing hearing aids, selling hearing aids to our wholesale organization. We have our retail part, which is hearing care. And then we have diagnostics, so they develop diagnostics equipment for diagnosing, how well is your hearing working or not. We have an organization which is built within the 4 different business areas, and what is really key to understand is that they are very different in the way that they are structured, in their needs, how they operate. So in the diagnostics we have screeners, who are young people who come in for a very short period of time in their career. We have doctors employed in our clinics. We have R&D people, so all with very different journeys within our organization and different needs. In addition to that, our organization is built out of mergers and acquisition, and we have a tradition for a very decentralized culture. So coming with global systems is not, something that people would just say, woo, that's a very good solution. We want to do that. Everyone basically wants to have something that is catered for each and every of their needs. So we have been very clear, so we are trying to be very clear on the fact that we want to build our competitive advantage on 2 things, and I think this comes maybe for most organizations basically. So we want to leverage the scale opportunity that we have. We are present in many countries. We are a big organization with many employees, more than 20,000 employees, but at the same time we of course want to build solutions that is business area centric or customer centric to the many different customers that we actually have. And that set the foundation for how we decided to actually build the new and upgraded Recruiting Central platform. So we did have a recruiting system already. We did know that it was used. People thought it was old-fashioned. Our markets were starting to say, oh, but we can get another solution. We want something over here because this is not working. Can we go to Cornerstone? Can we do, different things? So that was what we were facing. We actually did know that we didn't want to change away from SuccessFactors because, all of you know in here that changing, an overall HR IT platform is not necessarily better. It's just making the trouble even worse. So we had decided, SuccessFactors was the platform for the future. So we actually said, okay, so let's try and spend a little bit of time to figure out what will make this system work for our entire organization. So that was, so we knew we had the opportunity, so we tried to figure out, how can we do that in the best way. So what we actually ended up with, and that is how it proved to me at least that the approach that I will share with you in just a little while actually worked. Because as part of this project, I got an extra little role. So I became the global process owner of recruitment, not just in our retail business, but in our entire Demant business. So now I was trying to figure out, what everyone wanted and not just a retail organization. So I was 100% sure. I must admit, I was totally sure that when we had designed the new recruiting platform, we would have a process that was catered for a wholesale organization, we would have a process for a retail organization, and we would have something for our production and for our screeners. And that was not the case. So we ended up with something totally different. We ended up with processes that were designed based on, the candidates that we were trying to attract. So we have now a process that is basically a standard process that with the different phases. We have a process which is for the jobs that are very difficult to attract candidates. So that's what we call easy to apply. And then we have an easy to apply for mass positions where we can use the same job requisition over and over again. So that was totally different from where I started, and that was actually the proof to me that we actually had done it in the right way. And what we actually did was based on our leadership philosophy that I will share with you in a little while, which is called Fair Process Leadership. It is from a professor called Ludo van der Heyden, and I think he has a very cool name, especially if you're Danish and play Ludo. So it is his first name. He has something that is called Fair Process Leadership. It is really useful. I have used it in several organizations. It is an approach where you accept as a global organization and a head office or the ivory tower that you don't have all the answers. In order to design something, you really need to ask and listen well. So what we did initially was that we invited all recruiters, all managers, all from the entire organization of the 20,000 basically employees that we have who wanted to participate. So they were invited for a series of workshops where we actually ask, what are the business needs within recruitment? So let's not talk the process, let's not talk about what's working, what's not working. Let's talk about the business. What are your requirements and how you want to operate? We spent time, we asked the question, we listened well, and we noted all the things that people actually wanted. The next phase was the explore phase. So here we actually started to say, okay, so these are the business needs. How can we design a process that is actually delivering on the business needs that we actually have? So here we listened quite a lot. We asked a lot of questions, but we also took the opportunity to say, okay, but if you want this, maybe you cannot get this. So what would you prefer to have at this stage? But we tried not to talk so much about the system, but more about the process that the system were to facilitate and support on the longer run. After that, we went into the system configuration, and I have a part of my key stakeholders here from the HR IT team as well, who actually ran, what I think is a fairly standard configuration, UAT and testing and all of that process. And that went, really well, and we had some clarifications on what it should look like initially. Then we went into, of course, the execution phase, and we implemented with all the difficulties within hypercare and everything. So that was basically not more easy than anything else. And finally, we actually did something that I think was really smart. So we actually took the time to evaluate. So I did, 40 interviews or something like that, asking everyone who had implemented the new module and asked them, what do you think about the process? Anything that we could have done differently? But even more important, I actually asked the question, so what are the key benefits that you wanted to have that you actually did get, and what do you think about it? So that was the process. Along the way, we figured out, so we need to invest in the change management, and we'll come back to that in a short while. So I just mentioned, the fair process leadership. And for me, this concept is really, really key. It is a process first and foremost, that you start to listen, ask a lot of questions, as I mentioned before. And at a certain point, you come into a decision now, or a certain point you get to to the time where you actually need to start making some decisions. And it's really important that when you start making decisions, you say, okay, so I got your feedback and your input, but I actually decided to go in another direction, and be really clear and explain why you actually made that kind of decision, because it makes it more easy for the people when they are to implement at a later stage. At the same time, as you're doing, this process phase, you need to be very clear on a certain set of behaviors. It is important that when people give you feedback, that you actually show in your behavior and in your attitude that you are really willing to, for instance, change your perspective. So you can actually also show in your behaviors that you are changing. And at the same time, the communication practices, really actively listening at the beginning, but also start to not listen so much at the end, because at a certain point you really need to show direction and commitment. This is what I truly believe in as a leadership part in a matrix organization. I think this is even more important. So, something else that also enlightened our understanding of what was really required was that at this point in time, it was Stepanka and me, so we were two people running a global implementation or the change part of a recruiting system. We don't really believe in centers of excellence. We don't have the resources either to do center of excellence. So we don't have people sitting at our head office in Smørum and saying, so this is the global process. I'm the global process owner next to my global HR business partner role, so we don't have those roles. What we truly believe is having people building systems together with people who are going to use it in the future. We use it as part of our communities of practice, which you can see here. Yes, lucky me. And the communities of practice is a community of people where their main role is to be recruiters, HR managers on a day-to-day basis. And we collect them and we ensure and facilitate the approach and the way that they discuss and the topics, but they are the experts on how we need to recruit in the future. Our philosophy is that there is no reason to hire smart people and then tell them everything that they need to do. Why not just hire smart people so they can tell us what to do? So that is basically the approach that we have behind our communities of practice. So Stepanka will talk to us a little bit about the purpose.
Thank you. Yes, and that's what we also decided to use in the implementation project regarding the change part of the project. It was this community of practice way of working together. Why do we do it? Of course, we do it because we want to help ourselves, but also we want to motivate and engage our colleagues who work with the processes in the daily life. So we want to motivate them and engage, and we want to attract the talent. We believe in that giving them opportunity to work in the communities of practice, they actually will be attracted and believe that it's an exciting development of their competencies. It's also part of the learning from each other and sharing experience. And as an organization, we want to support that. From an organization perspective, of course, we are a global organization, so we want to integrate. We want to do the things global way and the same way, but still we need to have a different views in the process, and we want to use the resources we have in the different business areas. So it's like having focus on both the organizational development and the individual development of the employees. It's in general a community of practice which we want to work with in the future very much in the new operating model, and that was the change network. It was this kind of a community practice which we used in this particular project for Recruitment Central. And What we did, as Pia, she has mentioned, we don't really have an expert center of excellence doing the change management globally. Some people who just go out to the business areas and do the change management part. So how it always has been done traditionally is that the local teams, they were responsible. It was decentralized, and they were responsible for driving the change management part. We thought that it wasn't effective enough. We wanted to do it better, but still with the limited resources. So what we did, we put this change network together and got all the recruiters, everyone who was part of the process in the countries, and work together. We believe in when we work together and share experience, then we get much better process, and the results are also much better. So we got great help from effective people from Neha, who has helped us with how to do things. She has helped us with the tools which we can use, and with the framework how to do the change, because we are not, maybe today we are a little bit experts, a little bit more experts, but at that point we definitely were not experts in change. So for us it has been a great help, and what we have realized after this project is that we need to find out who is impacted by the change. It's one of the crucial things to finding out who's your stakeholders and looking at them and making analysis, what's important for them, what we need from them and what they need from us, and where they are in the organization, and how do we maintain the relationship with them. Then the next part is looking at the change and the stakeholders we have identified and how they are impacted by the change, and what actually is the benefits for each, and what are the concerns or the risks. Because that's what we need to remember. It's not just implementing the change. We need to know how people in the different groups are affected and what they get out of it, and what we need to take care of regarding the group. And in order to manage the change impacts, then there are some different, we call it change interventions, which then can be used depending on what impacts the different groups they are, how they are impacted. This is kind of way going through the stakeholders to the change impact assessment and to actually making a detailed plan of interventions, which we now have used for the first time, working in the group. And this was really a group work, because it wasn't just me or Pia sitting and doing these things. We have established some groups in this network who were working with the interventions and with the detailed things, and then presenting for the group and discussing things. And when we have created some materials, they were shared, they were put on the teams, and everyone could use them for their local change plans. So we were involving people in the network, getting them share experience and work together, and then also sharing and learning from each other. And we actually have found out that this is something which works, and we are using this on the next projects we are implementing. The next is performance management, and we are using exactly the tools and the way of working also for the next project, because now we know it works. Yeah, so that was my part.
Mm-hmm. So did everything go smoothly without any issues? No. And if I tried to tell you, you would have known I was lying. So I just wanted to share with you a few key learnings that we actually did, both from, what could we learn from a global perspective and what could we learn from a local perspective. So first and foremost, having and investing in project management, spending time on who is actually the project manager, what is the roles and responsibilities, How do we have a governance around it? How do we ensure that we follow up on a regular basis, that we progress, who is saying what to whom, when, and also investing in the change management at a very early stage is really key and really important. And as Stepanka mentioned, investing in change management is not necessarily that you bring Neha and 10 change champions into the organization, because what we have really seen this time of a benefit is that applying the expertise and ensuring that the organization itself learn how to do the change actually gives a benefit for future projects. But invest in the project management, that is really key. That is also something to do with estimate, how much time are people supposed to spend in addition to what they are already doing, when are we doing it, ensuring that if you set a timeline, keep it, because some people actually do commit the resources within the timeline, and other people actually think maybe we can just move it a little bit. And we were nice people. We are actually very nice people. So we start moving the timeline. And what actually happened was that moving the timeline meant that the people who actually allocated the resources, all of a sudden they didn't have the resources anymore because the project was delayed. So we are more strict, we try to be more clear, we try to be more accountable, that when we have a deadline and a project plan, this is what we will stick to. And it's not just for our sake and our own resources at the global perspective, but it is actually in the interest of all participants, so you actually know what is expected. Then we learned about follow through. So there is only so much a user of a system can learn as part of the introduction. Even though you tell them everything that the system can do, they will not capture it. So from the feedback sessions that we did, it became very clear for me, that there were a list of things that they have heard about that they never got. And when I talk to my nice colleagues in HR IT, they say, well, they actually do get it. We did train it. So that actually was the starting point to say, okay, but maybe we need to do more on a longer term to ensure that people can actually benefit and use the system as intended. So for the performance development, my new approach is, let's start with the basics. Let's try to use that first, and then we can build on additional functionalities over time, because there's only so much that you can actually learn. On a local perspective, I also shared, that it's really important that when we ask to commit resources, it is important that you commit resources. So that's the other part. It is also important that you try to think about, what is the implications on the way that I work on a day-to-day basis. We found some fun stuff as part of implementing the Recruiting Central, where, it was basically not part of the project, but all of a sudden some other processes needed to change that we hadn't been aware of. So that part is also very important. And then the last part is the change management, as Stepanka mentioned. Before we said, fix the change management part yourself, you go figure it out, and eventually let's cross our fingers that it will work for your users out in the world. But that is definitely not enough. Using the 3 elements, what are your stakeholders? How are they impacted by the new system that you are introducing? And how can we help them capture? That are the 3 key fundamentals in change management going forward. So what we actually learned is we need to do something going forward, and that will be the last slide.
And I just know that we don't have so much time left, if we have any. So I don't know if we should ask for if there are any questions at this point, or because what this slide says, we work further with the change. We have an after implementation community where we still work on learning and sharing experiences. So the work doesn't stop with going live with the system, but it actually continues also after the implementation is done.
Yes, as suspected, we've run out of time, haven't we, Marit? So first of all, round of applause to Demant. Let's do this in an informal way. Stepanka and Pia are around during the break. Grab them, grab me, and we might do questions a bit more informally. the idea was to have questions and have Stepanka and Pia sit on this lovely sofa, but we didn't get there. But I just wanted to summarize to say that a really simple concept of change network that I explained in a very theoretical way, you've really seen it come to life. But what you're also seeing is that it is deep-rooted in your culture, in your philosophy. There is really strong elements of governance, accountability, continuous improvement. So it's not all the soft, fluffy stuff people think changes. It's pretty hardcore. Yeah? So have a lovely rest of the day. Pia and Stepanka are going to be around for other questions. Thank you.